Привіт усім.
Доброго дня, колеги.
So hello everyone, hello dear colleagues. We're about to start our monthly event where the Center for Economic Strategy is trying to overview the economical situation during the war. My name is Gleb Wyszliński. I am the Executive Director of the Center for the Economic Strategy. I'm pleased to welcome all of you here. We are broadcasting at our page on Facebook. And we're also having our participants in Zoom who are joining us via Zoom, and I think we'll have more people coming and joining us as well. So this month, we would like to have our monthly research and review provided together with our long-term partners from the Journal Economic Treaty, and I'm pleased to welcome Mr. Kirchner, who is our colleague, who is our partner and who is also the deputy of the head of the German economic team that is helping for many years already in bringing up the economic policies in Ukraine and developing the economy in Ukraine. And I would like to now ask Robert Kirchner for his intro words, please.
Yes, thank you very much. I hope everyone can hear me. Good afternoon and a warm welcome also from my side to all the participants of today's webinar, What is Needed to Bring Ukrainians Home, which is devoted to the presentation of the third issue of the monthly review of the Ukrainian economy, prepared by our colleagues from the Center for Economic Strategy in Kiev. It's a great pleasure for the German economic team, whose deputy team leader I am, to continue our excellent cooperation with the Center for Economic Strategy in co-hosting this event today together. The German economic team, as was said, is an economic policy advisory project funded by the German government. We have been active for many, many years in Ukraine and in another 6 countries in the Eastern Partnership region, in the Balkans, and in Central Asia. I think it is fair to say that this monthly review report has already established itself in a very short period of time as a key source of information for domestic and international stakeholders that want to learn more about the economic, the financial, and the social situation in Ukraine during wartime. Beyond the monitoring function, I think it also identifies special topics that emerge and deserve attention by both policymakers and international partners. In addition to the review or the reviewing of the recent situation and trends in various sectors of the economy, today we will focus on the issue of war-related migration and the subject of Ukrainians returning home. This will be later on also a topic for a panel discussion with Ukrainian and international experts. Having said that, now I will give back the word to Gleb Wyszliński, the Executive Director of the Center, who will moderate the discussion. Gleb, thank you, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Robert. Robert, дякую.
Thank you, Robert. And I also would like to add to what we've had in our intro moments. I also wanted to add that our monthly report and our monthly overview is going to be presented together with our media partners, together with the Ekonomiczna Prawda broadcasting. And we're going to have our broadcasting together with Espresso television channel. We're really grateful for our media partners, because now more and more people will be able to know more about what is going on in the Ukrainian economy. So the main title and the main topic for our today's event and for our today's report and discussion, as we have come up with our colleagues, is like what Ukrainians are coming up to. So basically coming back to, or what is needed to get Ukrainians back. So we have like a double content to this title, because we are tackling the 2 issues about Ukrainians coming back and about the economy that Ukrainians are coming back to. What would be the economy that would be attractive enough for you to get back to? So is there a sense in coming back, or it's way too early? So this is how we're going to be building up our today's presentation and our today's discussion. Afterwards, we're going to start with the Deputy Director of the Center for Economy Strategy, Maria Repkova, is going to introduce you with the overall overview of the situation in May. And then the senior economist professional, Oksana Kolomiyets, is going to give us more details on what is going on in the migrations trends, what's going on with Ukrainian refugees and displaced persons, with the opportunities of them coming back. So what do we see in this situation as of now? And then we will have our discussion with invited experts, as we've had the two previous times already. But before I pass the floor to Maria, another technical moment for all of us. So right now we're going to be publishing the briefs slightly later. We're going to have the briefs later, going to be ready later today. We're going to publish it on our website slightly later. So everyone who got registered to this event, they're going to receive them in the newsletter. We're really sorry that we were not able to send it in advance. We wanted to make it more precise. There's a lot of things that have happened during last weeks that we needed to add into that as well. Thank you very much for your attention, and I pass the floor to Maria, please. Yes, hello, dear ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Gleb. Thank you, Robert. Thank you for the welcoming words. I hope that today's event is going to be very interesting for all of us. And I'm going to share our presentation right now. I hope that everyone can see that now, and we can start. So today we wanted to discuss what has been happening during last months in the economy of Ukraine. And we have a lot, as I would say, trends that are really challenging. That's something that is really threatening. The war is ongoing and Ukraine is losing its territory. So you can see that this is the graph that we have used in our previous overview in May last time. So you can see the situation is right now. So Ukraine right now has lost Mariupol, and Russia is moving forward. They have moved in the east and in the south of Ukraine. So we also know that there were losses to the economy of this region as well as Russians advance. So the economy already learns how to live in the war conditions. In our review, based on the European Business Association data on the activities of their members' companies as of day 100 of the war, half of the companies have been working full scale. And last month, we had less than 30% of companies working during the wartime. The very same results have been shown by the National Bank of Ukraine, and I've also used their report here, this graph from their report, straight away into this presentation. If, for example, in March, we had less than 30% that didn't work. So right now, according to the survey by the National Bank, only 14% of the enterprises are not working. It means that the economy is adapting, which is a good thing to do. The capacity outload is right now only 50% according to the pre-war level, but it's still very good. The agricultural sector, 75% of the areas have been processed, but now we need to harvest it as well. You can see the broader things in our overview as well about the balance of the external trade has really decreased, and that's one of the important trends that has influenced the currency markets. The export has only restored by 4.5% in April. We have problems with logistics, with the blocked ports, the losses in the metallurgical sector that was a very powerful exporter, and we know that Mariupol and Azovstal have been lost from Ukrainian economy as of now. And if we can say what is the additional anti-motivation for the exporters is to include cash into Ukraine due to the multiplicity of the currency rates, and you have to sell it with 29 hryvnias, which is not the real reflection of the cash rate. So that's the smaller exporters, they are not really happy to provide their income to Ukraine. There is a very different situation about imports. We have restored the imports. It has shown really nice growth, where 41% from monthly basis. It has turned out because we have improved the critical imports list, and I would like to remind you that in March we've had stopped all of the imports, and there was just a very brief list of the critically important imports that were provided for the importing needs. And this rate for 21-25, it was used to procure the goods of the critical imports. Right now, the list is much broader, and I think it's the news that came yesterday or even today that the list has been broadened, and just right now the Ministry of Economy is now included the services as well, the consultational services, informational services. So right now we're broadening this list of the critical imports. Thus the import grows. And the import grows because there is the resurrection of the consumption demand. So people have got out of the first shock. They're now starting to buy some goods. They're now starting to buy some services as well. And also the increase of the imports is a bit due to the lower course for the currency rates for buying the procuring goods. And so we see that growth of imports. The negative balance for the goods and services, one thing that I have forgotten before, in the balance of the goods and services, we have another categories of costs for the Ukrainians abroad. So because Ukrainians are using the banking cards to pay for the shops and groceries and the supermarket for the booking in for the premises, and these expenses are quite significant. We have more than $1.5 billion a month. Those are basically the costs that Ukrainians spend abroad. So the negative balance for goods and services for the months, it has increased significantly. As of the current operations, this negative balance can be covered by the grants. The overall current operations is $1 billion, but still this story was really, really painful for the rate stability. And the National Bank has managed to do the very significant currency intervention in order to cover the demand for the dollars. Talking about the monetary part of our report, the inflation has increased from 16% to 18% during May, if we will calculate it as an annual dimension. That's mostly due to the prices of the fuels, plus 50%. And that will be also transferring to the prices to almost all of the products and all of the goods, depending on what is the share of the fuels that has been included into the cost of the product. It's also very important that we have a close correlation. Almost all of the money that the National Bank has been printing to cover the deficit of the budget, they all end up in the currency market. So the costs are almost balanced. On one hand, it helps us to observe this grievous liquidity that we currently have due to the flow of money for the external bonds, but at the same time, it also increases the pressure for the currency, and thus, it's not that much of the good anchor for the inflation expectations. Our gold reserves has decreased by 2 billion due to those interventions that the National Bank was forced to do. The policy of the double currency rate has now really been hard. It's really hard to keep up with that, and it's getting more expensive with every week. The gap between the official rate and the currency rate and the cash rate is almost 20%. So right now the official rate is 29.25 for $1, and it's up to 35 hryvnias in cash exchange. So the National Bank has an important issue that is currently being discussed. When should we let go the currency and rates? And I would like to tell you that there's no answer to this question right now. Some of the people in the market, they have reflected in a bad way, responded in a big way for the interview of the head of the National Bank that the course is going to be, the rate is going to be let free. Let's set free as soon as possible. It's not going to happen like that, but we need to find the best balance as soon as possible. Another story that also is about finding the new balances and the new equilibriums for the banking reality is about the protection of hryvnia. The National Bank has increased the interest from 10% annually to 25% annually. And the companies, the banks, the budget, they're now complaining that it's going to be much more expensive for them to process their debts. But we all understand that the 10% of rate of interest in this economy situation that we currently have during the warfare, it cannot be treated as possible, as feasible. So in order for us to preserve at least the savings of the people in hryvnias, then the interest rate should be much, much higher. At this graph, you can see that there's a saldo of the NBU intervention, and you can see that the sales of currency has now got to the level of $3 billion for months. Just for you to understand, that is the highest level since 2015. So that's a very significant amount of money that we're talking about for Ukraine. The next slide, let me take a look at that, the state finances. That's also about the state, the block of the state finances that we've had in our report. I would like to ask you to take a look at this in more details. It's hard just to comprehend the figures from the screen during the presentation, but try to be briefly. We can see that the result has improved compared to April. Almost all of the expenses have grown from month to month, but still they are quite low as we compare it on the before crisis level or on the level that has been planned by the state budget of 2022. So you can see that overall tax fiscal incomes, there are slightly more than 87 million hryvnias, but the state had to spend more than 200 billion. So basically, we understand that we were not able to cover even less than a half with our own income of the cost to cover the costs. So that's why we've engaged the grants, engaged the loans, and the National Bank has covered part of the deficit that we've had by printing new hryvnias and issuing new hryvnias. In our report, we also have a part that's the discussion part on this equilibrium and the coordination between the policy of different state institutions. You might have noted it down already that all of the institutions have their own priorities and everyone is trying to communicate with our institutions ad hoc. So we do not see the really good coordination between the institutions, between the governmental institution, the good systematic approach. There's something that we do not see, and we do hope, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. So yes, the interest of the government and the parliament of Ukraine, what are they doing? They are improving the list of the critical imports list, which influences currency badly, and they are providing the fiscal discounts, and they need a lot of money to get social system and the army system to be supported as well, to compensate the debt in energy and fuels for the 579 loans programs and other state programs. But in the same time, the Ministry of Finances, no matter how they would like to non-finance those taxes, they cannot do that. And under the fiscal discounts and under the increased costs for army and all of the other expenses, the Ministry of Finance has to finance the big budget deficiency as well. The Ministry of Finance really would like to do that with the lowest credit rate. So due to the increase of the interest rate of the National Bank, but we have not increased the rate on the internal internal debt bonds. They're trying to preserve it on the previous levels, and they're really interested in covering those deficiencies, and the National Bank will have to monetize this deficiency of the budget as well. On behalf of the National Bank, they want to hold on to the currency rate stability and to preserve its reserves. All of those things from this block, from this interest, and they are going against all the things that you have heard before about what the National Bank actually did. So all the three main economical operators, they're trying to push Ukraine to different directions. And in my point of view, I think that there's already a high time for a serious coordination between all of those institutions to be set in place. What are the other parts of our reports is the part of the financial aid for $6.8 billion that we have received before the war. Since the war started, we believe that it's not enough. The Ministry of Finance says that there is at least $5 billion we need a month. And the grant part of this money, only 20%, and it has to be increased so that Ukraine can stand through this storm. And we see that the financial support that has been pledged are higher than Ukraine has already received. And another point of our report is about the candidacy and about the possibilities of European integration of Ukraine. The European integration would have significantly helped our country in the post-war restoration and in the continuation of reform. The candidacy status would be definitely provided us with these opportunities for having this population of Ukraine to understand where we're going with those reforms. It would have given the significant impetus for the structural reforms, for the anti-corruptional reforms, for the building of the good and trustworthy institutions. There has been a lot of work that has been conducted in the associations agreements, and we have seen it through the surveys as well. We do hope that the European partners will be able to evaluate our efforts, and they will understand that geopolitically the place of Ukraine has to be in the European Union as well, together with the European Union, because it's either Ukraine is going to be a part of the European framework of and the security framework and economical framework as well, all through some time in a year or 2 or 10 years. If we will not get the support, so we will have no gray zone no more, and a part of Ukraine is definitely risking to become a part of the Russian Federation and Russian defense framework as well. We do hope that our European partners will help us not to get to that situation, and we hope that we will convert the candidacy and the membership of Ukraine in the European Union. And on the restoration and reconstruction of Ukraine, the candidacy status for the European Union will give us very positive assumptions for the private actors in the market, not only due to the idea that we will already have some market shares in the European market by going to be placing the production lines in Ukraine, but also the Ukraine as a candidate is going to continue the reforms of our judicial systems and the corruption reforms, building up the institutions. We're going to be more sustainable economy then, and we are going to be growing our overall worth, and we understand that the private capital is going to be much more interested in investing into the stronger candidacy, in stronger Ukraine that's going to be a candidate if it's not going to happen. So then the reconstruction is going to be held by the budget money, which is not very attractive for the private parties as well. Thank you for your attention, and I would like to remind all of the people who have been listening to me that the National Bank has a special open account that you can use to donate some money for the Ukrainian army to support the fight of Ukrainians. Thank you. Yes, thank you, Maria. Thank you so much. Right now, we will have the second presentation in place for today. We can hear someone as well. Please mute your microphone. So right now we will have our second presentation. The second presentation, it's going to be the presentation that is going to be the basis for our discussion, the panel for our, as the start of the discussion, the overview of the migration trends. And because this month we have had a report by Alexandra Kolomiets, who's going to right now be reporting on those really brief reports. And we've had the record-breaking amount of views as our publication in the Center of Economical Strategy, more than 70,000 reports in Ukrainska Pravda. We had it under the title, How Are We Going to Get Everyone Back? There are two components to this topic. One of them is a short time, the one that we evaluate on a monthly basis, of how the lack of Ukrainian citizens influences the consumptions inside of Ukraine, how it impacts the short-term economic trends and tendencies. Then we also try to evaluate the long-term economical and social development of Ukraine. So that is why we would like to talk about that. We understand that this issue right now is highly discussed, and for the very first months of summer, because we know during the summer we had a lot of Ukrainian refugees or displaced persons are going to make their decisions about what to do next. So that is why we've decided to have this discussion on the second topic, not only to discuss the macroeconomical stability, but to discuss this topic as well. So that is exactly why we have invited Alexandra and other participants for these discussions. We've invited the colleagues who have the specific knowledge about that. I would like to pass the floor to Alexandra, having said that, for her presentation, please. Hi, I'm pleased to welcome all of our people, all of our participants and audience. Can you hear me? Yeah, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to present. Yes, my review will be dedicated to the issues of migrations and for how to get Ukrainians back home. This is the main trend of the migrations of Ukrainians coming back, and we evaluate it very positively. We have used the data of the International Organization of Migration that has been conducting their research about the IDPs for Ukraine, about the main conditions for their life, evaluates the amounts of the internally displaced persons in Ukraine. And during this research, they're also providing the research of how many people have returned to Ukraine. At this very slide, then you can see how this situation have changed with the amounts of the internally displaced persons from the 16th of March to the 23rd of May. On the 23rd of May, they've had the final fifth round conducted, but the research continues, so we will have more results coming. The main impact of this research was the decrease of the internally displaced persons throughout all of this period. The amount of the internally displaced persons have decreased throughout this period. That's what the international migration organizations had outlined. And you can see this gray zone, that this is the amount of persons who are still considering whether they would like to leave from their constant place where they're currently residing to another city due to the security and safety factors, due to war. And you can see that this amount of people is still quite high. About the internal displacements of the country, the main trends are as follows. First of all, we can see that there is increased security in Kiev region, in the northern regions of Ukraine. And so we can see that people that lived in Kiev and in northern parts of Ukraine are returning. In some cases, we have the people of the western regions coming back as well. Also wanted to add up that you can see there is amount of people who have returned back to return. So you can see that every first person of the people who have been surveyed, 22% that have said that they're not yet fully back, but they're planning to get back in the next 2 weeks. So we are expecting that for the next round of survey, we will have much more people who will be reported to be back to Ukraine and to the main places of their residence. I just wanted to outline that only 7% out of 4.5 people who have returned, only 7% they have returned from abroad. All of the other people have been moving inside of the territory of Ukraine. So the share of people who have returned from abroad is still not very significant. It can be explained that the people who left abroad, that there were the people who were not planning to get back home as soon as possible. So they would like to stay for a longer periods of time due to the security reasons. And people who wanted to get back as soon as possible, as soon as the security and safety situation will provide them with this opportunity, they wanted to come back to the main residence place. Just wanted to say that the International Migration Organization have shown up that it is considered that inside of Ukraine, people mostly have moved to the relatives, but most of them have been renting out the apartments with their own money. And it was one of the stimulus for them to get back to their previous house, to be their previous residential places, just to decrease the costs. Here we can see the UN organizations on refugees, the refugee councils of the UN, and we have the overall figures for that. We know that these data are not reflecting the amounts of people who have left Ukraine, because we have a lot of pendulum migrants who have been going through the border in the last months, and even the UN offices right now at their website, they do not say that this is the overall amount of people who left Ukraine as we did it in the first months, that this is only about figures on crossing the border. And we have to understand that we have a lot of people, especially for the neighboring countries like Poland and Romania and Hungary, they're just reporting right now that Ukrainians are going home almost on a weekly basis. So there was a lot of people who need to come up with some actions and come up with some issues to be figured out in Ukraine. They're coming back home to Ukraine. They've closed the questions and they come back to the country or the place of their residence. And also wanted to say that this data from the UN, they does not meet the data that we have from the data from the state customs and state border services from Ukraine. We also have this pendulum migration, but at some point it has been outlined that the number of the people who've left Ukraine. And right now we have the reasons to that, and our colleagues and the other experts have outlined that this is kind of a mystery for us. We have provided the claim to the service of the border control of Ukraine, because and they've told us that people have not just tracked for the very first weeks of the people. They have been outlined in the databases that they are crossing the border. They had already this moment that they can move freely as asylum seekers if they left Ukraine after the 24th of February. But the data on the people who left Ukraine was not included into the system of our border services. And that is why they're not able to say how many people left. They've only have been stamping it in the passport. They have written up in the cards for the first 2 weeks. But the data of the High Commissioner, it meets the data of the other border services of our neighboring country that have also tracked the people who have got into the country. And they've tried for the very first couple of weeks, they've also tried to increase the capacities of the main checkpoints in order to get people coming to the other countries. So there's no mysteries here. So they are being approved by the border services of Ukraine because they haven't fixated the outflow of people in the first 2 weeks after the war started. You can see at these graphs, we can see the overall trend as well. And we can see that people who live in Ukraine, the number of people who live in Ukraine is higher than the number of people who are coming back. So we can see the data about the amount of Ukrainians who have already had the temporary protection in mostly European countries. We know this data, you can find this data as of now. We know that the most of the refugees are now in Poland, then we have Germany, and then we have Czech Republic. Germany has been for a longer period of time on the position 3 after Czech Republic, but that's because they have a very slow procedure of providing the temporary protection. And when all of the people who have been applying for protection, when they have received it, so it was a really big increase of the population. So right now, Germany is on the second position. What is very interesting that in this case, we also see how many refugees, what is the percentage with the real population of the country. And we can see here that we have an updated data as well, that the biggest share of the refugees for the local population is in Czech Republic, then in Moldova, Estonia, Poland, Lithuania, and Slovakia and Latvia. So speaking about when we have a lot of refugees compared to the overall amount of population, it definitely creates additional tension for the social and economical infrastructure. And one of our colleagues has noted down that the main factor that we've had high diasporas in those countries, but it's not the only factor why people have chosen this country. The main factor for choosing this country, for the refugees who chosen this country, was that it was a very good language adaptation for the language barriers. For example, if we speak about Poland or Czech Republic, or if we're talking about the Slovakia, we have very similar languages that are easy to learn. Speaking about Moldova, and there is a high number of population who speaks Russian. If talking about Estonia, Lithuania, and Latvia, that there is a high amount of population who also speak Russian language, and there is a high amount of population who speak English as well. So the person who knows English, it will be much easier to communicate in those countries than, for example, in Germany. And Germany was one of the countries where the main factor for attractiveness was the increased social effect, because 65% of the people, they have gone to see their relatives, because without the knowledge of German language, it'd be really hard to establish your life in Germany. So the language barrier is quite high in Germany, but the support from the relatives in close one has been one of the factors of attractiveness of Germany, and the high level of social protection and social assistance in Germany was one of the factors of their choice as well. Then, as we have already mentioned, people are coming back to their homes when they resided in Kiev or other safe regions of Ukraine. In the same time, the biggest amount of the displaced persons and are from the eastern regions of Ukraine. It's really dangerous there, and they're not ready to get back to those regions. So we understand that the potential of the return of the migration is going to be decreasing, but we still have some of the trends that are connected to those factors. For example, we have been discussed that the start of the educational year in Ukraine in the schools and universities is not going to be started in the traditional regime, and if it's going to be happened, then it will get a lot of teachers and educators and students. It's going to have a lot of people coming back to the country, and we're going to have a certain factor of migration before September, but it's still being discussed, because we know that there are some problems with the returns of the teachers and educators. It's really hard to get everyone together. We also have this fact as, for example, for the worker, the end of the term, so for the terms of that they can be abroad for the Ukrainian employees as well. They're going to be applying for the residency for the countries where they're located, and there might violate some of the terms. And those employers that will have given the opportunity to get their employees to the regional offices, and they have done it in a very fast pace. If people will not get back to their locations in Ukraine, they might even lose their job. There's also the factor of the decrease of the social aid for the refugees in the new countries. Some countries are providing more social aid, and some countries are not. But in time, they're going to be stimulating refugees for the return of their migration, and for the lot of people, it's going to be the stimuli to get back home. And there sometimes will be returning also because they will not be able to find employment in the countries they reside due to the language barrier as well. Thank you for your attention. Yes, thank you, Alexandra. I think then you can stop sharing your screen. Yes, thank you. And right now, I would like to start our discussion, and I would like to ask Anna Derevianko to start the discussion, who is an executive director of European Business Association, the biggest business association in Ukraine. And before we start and before we switch to the topic of Ukrainian migration and the return of the refugees to Ukraine and how the economy is going to be influenced by that, Anna, I wanted to ask you, so how do you feel that, and how does the members of your association feel that? So is the situation changing in the economy? What are the biggest challenges that the members of your association see, and what is that they're expecting from the state policy as well? And then we will switch the topic to the main topics of our human capital and our labor resources that we would like to get back to Ukraine. Anna, please. Yes, thank you very much, Liv. Well, dear friends, hello. Hi, everyone. I just wanted to say that the businesses have very dynamic point of view on that. And we see right now that there's still the shock period for the businesses. They have started during the first period of the war. It's now ceasing down. You know, the critical infrastructure has been working with no pauses, as we can see that we've had the systems of the informational connection has been working, the banking sector has been working without no cutouts. So the people were working in really harsh conditions. The other businesses that are not the part of the critical infrastructure, in a week or half a week, they've already started to raising their heads, and they've started to build up their capacities even and restore their capacities. And right now, quite a lot of companies that have been saying that they are now getting back at least to the 50% of their capacity that they've had before the war. Of course, no one is right now saying that they would like to have the overly incomes, even if they've had it as the business goals. So it's really hard to be done right now. The priority number one is to make sure that the businesses will survive. How to make sure that you're going to be paying salaries for your employees. Some companies are preserving their salaries without the changes, and we're going to talk about that as well. Some companies that were forced to cut down the salaries for their employees and cut down all of the other expenses that they've had in the company. All of those expenses have been reviewed. And talking on that, whether we still have the commitment from the companies, of course, we have seen their commitment still staying on. We've discussed a lot of things with our European companies, and they've said that the market of Ukraine is very interesting for them. And of course, it's about both the 2022, 2023, and other years to come in the future. But the question number one is how to make sure that we will have this financial capacities real for the companies. How can we find the access to additional financial resources? How can we make sure that we will sell the services and goods under the conditions when the opportunities for the population to buy these goods and services is really decreasing? And of course, the overall situation with inflation is only getting the situation worse. It's very good that the economy is more or less sustainable, but still it's really harsh for the companies that are presented in the market. And talking about the people right now and the human capital, because we had also the regular survey on how the businesses, what is the overall situation for the businesses. And I can also give you the outline about the moods that the businesses are currently have and what it is that we're going through. According to the data, I'm going to read this out, so I'm sorry, maybe that's not for me to get mistaken with the data. 74% of the companies are planning their changes in their HR policies. 26% of the companies are planning to freeze their budgets, their development budgets, and their educational and training budgets. 60% of the companies are planning to freeze the bonuses and the premium payments. You know, the bonuses and the rewards and premiums has a very harsh situation. You want to pay the salaries at least. 13% of the companies are planning to have the personal cut downs. 11% are planning to decrease the salary levels. So we can see that it's quite an optimistic data, just 11%. And 2% of people are planning to fire their employees, and only 3% of the companies are planning to hire more people. So we see that we even have the optimistic companies, the companies who are feeling quite okay in the market. Due to the martial law in Ukraine, 90% of the companies have said that they have the employees who've moved abroad. 23% of the companies have outlined that the amount of those employees is on the level of 11 to 15%. 70% of the companies, the amount of the employees that moved abroad varies from 16% to 20%. Another 17% of the companies have outlined that the amount of the employees that left abroad is on the level 21-30%. So you see that there is quite a lot of people. The most popular countries for relocation, for temporary relocation, is Poland. 77% respondents have noted down. We have Germany, 62% of respondents. And you know, I can even see that it's actually fits into the results that you have presented before. Czech Republic, 78%, 35% for Slovakia, 31% for Italy, Romania, 28%, Spain and Hungary, 27%, and 16% in Moldova. 60% of the companies have told us that their company is not planning to be relocated to the other countries. So basically, they are leaving all of those production lines in Ukraine. 15% have said that the relocation will be possible only in the borders of Ukraine. For most of the company, 56%, they have already said that their employee who have received the temporary protection in the European Union, they have not been employed by other companies abroad, and they're continuing working remotely, and they continue receiving their salaries as well. But there are still 25% of the companies where their employees have been employed abroad, but still continue to work on their company remotely as well. Only 8% of the companies have said that they've asked their colleagues that have already found a job abroad to write down to file for vacation, not to file for firing. So you can also explain that, because of course the European country, they are headhunting our people because sometimes our people are quite powerful. They can speak different languages. They're quite professional and in doing everything that they do. But in the same time, if we're talking about the international businesses who's paying quite good salaries for people in Ukraine as well, so there is not a significant difference from what is going to be paid as salary abroad. So I wouldn't say that there is the financial stimuli for the people to find job abroad if the salary is being preserved for the people. So they don't have a stimulus to find a job abroad. So I would have been calm here if we see that the international companies in Ukraine can continue their businesses, then the people will return. So what is needed for the businesses to get restored and to make sure that they will get back to the growing trajectory? First, of course, we need victory, because the victory will give safety. Because without that, it's really hard for us to think about for having the growth in place or having some really significant income. But still, if the security is not possible for us in the short-term perspective, so that is why in order for us to have investment on the territory of Ukraine, then we have to insurance this investment. So we have to introduce the military insurance or political insurance. Without that, it's going to be really hard for us to expect the investments coming. Because right now, what we have received as information from the companies, only those investments that are crucially important for the businesses, that's something that is currently being prolonged, that is important for the operational activities of the companies. So the main problems for the companies is the availability of the critical imports list, because some people cannot even pay for their concept parts abroad, because if not included, need to be part of the critical imports. The logistics is problem number one for the importers. Even for this IT companies, one of the biggest problems is still about the security, because even if they have their own developers in the territory of Ukraine, so does it mean that their clients, they might not work or they might not launch the contracts for the companies who are still working in Ukraine, because they have their employees in Ukraine. So number one need is peace, which is the number one demand for businesses and the population. Then the other thing is to resolve the issues with the logistics, with critical imports, and to find additional sources of financial support. Because right now the financial issues is very acute. What should we do in order to keep on paying people the salaries? And it's still 2022, and we're not even in the winter season yet. So we know there are some harsh times coming up, and year 2023 that is not cannot be forecasted at all. So I'm not trying to be very pessimistic, because right now I'm trying to plan for the next year as well. And I just wanted to tell you, because this year hasn't been harsh yet. It will be even. It might be even worse next year if we will not be victorious. So difference, trying to think of a marathon. So it's not going to be the sprint. We're trying to keep our power to the marathon. I hope that we will go through that and we will be able to survive this period and become stronger. Yes, thank you, Anna. If I've understood you the right way, and if I understood the main message of what you have said, because in the context of this topic that we're currently discussing is how we have provided this topic with. So in our case, we need to provide the jobs for the people that we want to get back, because we cannot guarantee them their positions, and maybe we will have some time when we are no, maybe for this time when they don't have this job guaranteed, they stay abroad. I think they will make the choice from themselves, Klip, because this is the question of the natural selection, if I might say that. It's the question of survival. We have some people who are really afraid to get back to Ukraine now, and they have this opportunity to live abroad for some time. They have financial resource that they're capable to survive there for some time. And even if they really want to get back home really strongly, before there will be the peace, official peace, they will not get back. So right you are, we need to provide them the opportunity to receive financial support, the salaries. They need to have the salaries and they need to see their businesses working. We have some companies who have been asking people to return back to Ukraine in administrative way. They either, telling them, ordering them to work in Kiev or where they are. There are establishing their parking lots into the shelters as well. And if you do not get back, then you are going to be fired and you're going to be replaced by the people who are staying in Ukraine. So we see this administrative regulation trend as well, but right now it's minority of the companies. Okay, we have a question from the chat, and I'm going to reshape it in a different way. On the level of your research and the level of your communication, can you name some of the sectors that feel the best right now during the warfare and the couple of sectors that have the worst situation? You know, the sectors does not matter in this case, because basically, you know, for the IT people, you would assume that it's better than everyone. But again, we have to understand that because every sector has been impacted, we don't have the winners and everyone are losing in our case, you know, very actively. There's a lot of we're using all of the reserves that we had, but some people are using less and losing less, and some people are losing more. So I think the IT sector, they now have more capacities compared to other sectors. Talking about the other sectors, it will depend, it will strongly depend on what was the position of the company before that, where the company located in the current area of the military actions or no. Can they sell their product or no? Do they have the reserves in their warehouses or no? Because we have one international company that has employed more than 1,000 people. And I thought that they had this opportunity to continue and support in their personal and just to feel themselves really good. But it turns out that they have got this jackpot because, you know, their production line is in Mykolaiv, in Chernihiv region, and is in Kherson region. And the situation turned out that way, that their production has been destroyed almost fully in all of those places where they're located. So their resilience reserve is right now on a level of 2 or 3 months. So yes, there are some different capacities in the companies. For example, for the companies that are located in the west of Ukraine, they haven't been impacted from their sheltering or from the shelling, and but they have slightly better positions than for those enterprises that are currently occupied territories. But I wanted to say that everyone is now suffering, everyone going through this challenge. So I think that you would agree to those ideas that I advocate as well during different discussions, especially public discussions, that the state support has to be focused on those enterprises that have been most impacted by the military actions, but not provided for all of the enterprises. Yes, I do believe we need to have the address support, but the address support has to be spent in a very transparent way as well, because we have those questions voiced out right now, and we have understood it more and more that the issues of the corruption has not disappeared. The first couple of months we've all been shocked, but then we've got to the business as usual. So these questions, they have to be also tackled. They have to be during, even though to the military actions, we need to fight corruption as well. Because if we will not be able to fight corruption, then we will not be able to follow the economical support from the international partners as well. Thank you, Anna. I would like to now retract the next question to the speaker from Raiffeisen Bank, but maybe as your business association has also been working on this issue. What about the fiscal residency? Because right now we know that a lot of people from Ukrainian companies, the one that are ready to pay their salaries to their employees and they would like to stay with their jobs. So right now they're facing this issue of this 180 days abroad for in the certain countries. So what will the fiscal expert side, the legal expert side that your association always boasted of? Yes, right you are. That's one of the key problems that we have seen recently. We have started to talk about that a couple of months ago because we all understand that at least in March, we're going to have this main time when the first portion of people have left abroad. And in September, we're going to have the due dates for this problem to be current. And one of the offers from our side would be to the Vice Prime Minister for Economic Relation for the Office of the President to make it as follows. And by the way, European Commission has also offered that way, to offer the Ukrainians who are currently under temporary protection, who are located abroad and who have the income from Ukraine, for them to receive the fiscal status in Ukraine. Because otherwise, after the 180 days, they should switch to the fiscal status of the countries that they are being located in. that they're currently residing in. And it means that there's going to be the increase of the fiscal tension for them, because the European countries, if they're talking about the payment for the salaries, it's much higher, at least 1.5 times, even sometimes twice, depending on the level of income that person receives. So that will be a definitely significant part of Ukrainians' income. So right now we need to discuss the issues of the fiscal residency. We are evaluating, we are now understand that we don't have it really flexible yet, especially when we compare it to the world. But right now it is a question that has to be politically resolved as well. And we have sent the letter already for the different state institutions and for the European institutions as well, so that on the political level, we would be also how it will be possible for us to resolve it as we have outlined. Yes, thank you so much. This regime that has been for the very first time used in the history of European Union, the first time that it has been used since the migration of refugees in Syria, it hasn't been worked fully. The issues of the fiscal residency and what we have seen also the opportunities of movement inside of the Schengen zone for the Ukrainians who are more than 90 days in the Schengen zone. And right now, the European Commission is raising this question as well, because this question has not been worked upon. It turns out that our heroic Ukrainian women who are currently representing Ukrainian businesses in the European Union countries, it turns out that they cannot travel accordingly in the European Union. They cannot go for the business trips and to award the contracts because this question is not regulated. They can be deported from these countries where they're currently located, and they can be taken down on this protection list. That's something, the problems that have to be resolved as well. Thank you, Anna. Right now gets to them from the more general level and from the level of the business association to the specific level of businesses. We have chosen our old partners that we have worked before, and we have thought about the Raiffeisen Bank, because the Raiffeisen Bank is the bank that employs a lot of women, as any other bank employs as well. This is the bank that is a part of international group that is represented in different parts of European Union as well. It is a bank that works all over Ukraine and in the territories that are currently occupied and where the military actions take place. And Julia is the head of the HR department for Raiffeisen Ukraine. Julia, we have a lot of questions to you, but let us start with the question of how strong the flow of people has impacted the banking service. Had it created some problems for you, or basically everything is that good that you were able to continue your operations flawlessly? And what you have seen with your employees that are currently abroad, what are their intentions? What it is that you're doing together with them to resolve those legal fiscal issues? What is your situation as of now, and what is your strategy further on for your employees that are currently residing abroad? Please. Hello, dear colleagues. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to share with you of how do we work with those issues in Raiffeisen Bank Ukraine. If you don't mind, I will speak in Russian because it's slightly not that easy for me to speak Ukrainian, and this business issues is an important content, and I would really like to provide the best quality understanding of that. So I think I will start with figures. 15% of our employees have left the territory of Ukraine since the war broke out, since the 24th of February, and this 15%, of course, we're talking about a group of people who is the really harsh and the really complex group, because we have a lot of issues being raised that we haven't coped with before the war started. Of course, and I want to emphasize that, of course, we have been focusing on employees' security. So we're trying to also understand that the security of our employees is our priority number one. So we've given the full freedom to every person to make this decision for themselves of where they're going to feel themselves comfortable, where they will be safe. So as a bank, as an employer, we haven't provided any kind of measures to hold our people artificially. We've given them the opportunity to make this decision for themselves. Another important moment that I wanted to outline, I think that it's also influenced this high figure that we have, the 15% of people who left, because Raiffeisen Bank has its branches in different countries all over Central and Western Europe. So, our branches, our partnering banks, they have done a lot to support our employees who left abroad. So, if we're speaking about those countries that have the joint border with Ukraine, if talking about Poland, Slovakia, Romania, Hungary, those are the countries that have taken the first wave, that have taken the first hit, and that has been providing the financial support, moral support for Ukrainians. It is important to outline as well that Raiffeisen Bank, and I think we can be proud of that, Raiffeisen has done a lot and continues to do a lot for Ukrainians abroad, for all of our employees. The banks of our group has been provided up to 3 months of free accommodation and the free food supplies for our colleagues that left the country. And I wanted to once again emphasize that it was serious impact for the people to live as well, so that the people were not afraid that they're going to be left alone with all of the problems that they might face in the migration. And right now, 1/3 out of this 15% of the employees, they have already got back to Ukraine. 2/3 of this 15%, they're still located globally, I would say, because we have more than 40 countries where our people got to in the end. We've tried to analyze out of those 15% people, so where were the locations that they've left? And out of this 15%, almost half of those people are those employees that lived in Kiev and Kiev region. So basically half of the people who left abroad, those were the people from Kiev region. And I just wanted to say another moment. I was really listening careful to what Anna has said. An important other block that we are currently working on together with our partnering companies with Ernst & Young Ukraine, is the fiscal and the tax residency for Ukrainians, because it turns out that the legislation, it doesn't change that fast as the situation in Europe is changing. So, of course, the legislation, the fiscal legislation, it has not changed yet as of today. As far as I know, there's just one country that has provided some kind of the fiscal holiday. That's only about Denmark. All of the other countries, they are preserving the very same legislation with no changes. So 180 days is there, is valid. I have been participating in one of the sessions for the Ernst & Young group meetings, and they are currently developing this kind of recommendations for the Ministry of Finance of developing the fiscal residency. And it's not only about how to help and how to financially support Ukrainians abroad, but it's also about how can we help Ukrainian state in this case as well. How can we help the Ukrainian state not to lose those taxes that are currently being paid by the people who left abroad? The third command from my side would be, and Anna has spoken about that as well, and this is having this opportunity to, in the hybrid regime, the COVID-19 has prepared us to the hybrid regime of work. And at this very moment, when our employees, this 15% of our employees have left the country, they still have this opportunity to work in the hybrid mode. Moreover, this hybrid mode is not only for the people who are away from the country, it's also about the people who have been our internal displaced people who have left their regions, who left their homes, and who have moved to the west of Ukraine or to the center of Ukraine. So this hybrid model of work has become the reality for the Raiffeisen Bank as of now. I wanted to emphasize it, having this opportunity right now, that 81% of our branches are currently open. Our departments are working, and they're only those branches that are at the temporarily occupied territories are the exception, or where the physical department and branches have been destroyed by the enemy. And we're physically unable to start the work there. So we're trying to restore the work of our branches in Chernihiv region, in Sumy region, in Kharkiv region, when the situation allows us to do that already. We're restoring our capacities and restoring our infrastructure. Also wanted to say that on the 4th month of the war, we're getting closer to this moment that we should continuing our business operations. We need to have this business continuity management in place. We need to provide the services to our clients inside of the country and abroad the country. We're talking about those people who are using the Raiffeisen online services, using the services of the call centers and so on and so forth. So right now we're getting to this very important moment when we are talking to all of our employees. We're having the regular surveys just to understand what are the plans and assumptions for our employees as well. So from what we have seen, that at least half of the people are getting ready to get back to Ukraine, and half of them haven't undecided yet, or they're going to stay abroad. So we have discussed it with our board of Raiffeisen Bank, that the main question is not of whether the person will be able to work in hybrid regime for a longer period of time, but it's whether the nature of the role, the nature of the person's position gives them the opportunity to be outside of the contact with their clients. So if the role presupposes sales, meeting the clients, contacting the clients, then of course, then the employee and their supervisor will have to make this decision, and they have to come back to Ukraine if they want to continue their work. Another important moment that I wanted to share with you, at the second month of war, we have already come up to understanding that at least 1/3 of our employees that left abroad will not be able, even with our Ukrainian salary, to survive in the countries they're currently located in. So we've started this program that is called the outplacement. So we've started negotiation with the Ramstad company inside of Poland that is providing a lot of assistance on the providing the employment for the Ukrainians. They have created more than 1,500 jobs for Ukrainians in Poland. Of course, we understand that most of those jobs are the jobs connected to the so-called blue collars job. So this is the office work, but still there's 10% of that would be also for the office workers, for the white collars as well. So we are now in negotiations with them, and we have the first 10 employees who are physically located, residing in Poland right now. And they understand that the level of their Ukrainian income, they will not be able to cope with in Poland normally. And their plans of life are now already connected to Poland. So we're going to be supporting their opportunity, find them the job opportunities in Poland, so that they will be able to integrate into the society and into the new culture, into the new country the most effectively. And I would sum up, that's because I was listening to the first presenters as well. The top 5 countries where our employees are located is Poland, Germany, Austria, Slovakia, and Italy. So those are the 5 top countries where most of our employees have been relocated to. So those are the top countries for the people who are right now abroad. Thank you. Glory to Ukraine. Glory to the heroes. And thank you, Yulia. We have 2 questions to you in the chat. The first question would be that what you have said about the collaboration with employment agencies, that was an unexpected thing for me to hear, because, under these conditions of quite good employment markets in the world and in the developed countries, and with a low level of employment, I thought that your employees are going to be collected by your banks in the different companies and different countries, and I'm surprised that it doesn't happen. The other question is, you said that half of your people that were from Kiev and Kiev region, so I do believe that they're mostly the office workers. the office workers that have worked in the main offices, but not other people who have worked directly with the clients. So do I understand it the right way, that you do not see the problem right now, that you do not have people right now who will work in the branches locally and who will provide the services to the clients? Okay, let me start with the second question, if I may. Actually, we have analyzed the profile of the people who have left out of Ukraine, and there was a surprise for us, but it's not that much the office worker, the office workers, the office employees, the headquarters employee, the geography matters as well, but not kind of function that you have performed is the most important thing. So if I remember the figures right, from the beginning of April, 1/3 of people who have left from our employees that were actually the employees with a starting salary. So those were the people who were either working for not that long a period of time or who just at the very start of their career in our bank. So those were not the people who worked in the headquarters, because we understand that the top managers, they have a slightly higher income as well. So 1/3, there was definitely the people who didn't have quite high level of income from our bank as well. Another point is that we have a lack of people, because we understand that the people who've left, starting from the beginning of May, we have launched a campaign or actually inviting people to get back, because we have a lot of work that has to be done. And as I've already said, and Anna has said about that we were able to provide the services to our clients and to work throughout these times. And I will be honest, we have been working under the heroic conditions. Our people have been courageous. They have been continuing working in the call centers, in the incassation as well. And during the rocket sheltering, people have went to the bomb shelters as well. But the overall, we have been working on the survey and providing the best services in all of our directions of operations. Right now, we see that we have a serious lack of people. And so one of the call outs from our side to our employees as well, and by the way, it's not just about our employees that left abroad, it's also about the employees that have been in the green zone right now, who've been relocated inside of the country. We are saying that we need new hands, we need new people. So we have the lack of people, but we understand that we are the bank that has been working in a country on the war. We understand that all of the positions that we can, the priority number one would be to fill in with our own candidates. And answering the first question that you've said about this employment for inside of our partnering banks that all over the world, what we have seen that and what we have faced. Because first of all, there are very serious limitations for some people, the English and the foreign languages. And unfortunately, in Ukraine, for the last years, the recent years, we were not able to increase the knowledge of foreign languages to the certain level so that it would be the very good working language. And I'm not only speaking about the Raiffeisen Bank Ukraine, but I'm speaking about the overall educational system. But right now it fought back, because if we've had a better level of knowing English, or if there will be more opportunities for our employees. So basically the first limitation would be English. The other limitation for that, and let us not forget about that, we're talking about the Czech Republic or Slovakia. The first moment we have the first 10 people who have been at the positions inside of their banks, the Raiffeisen Bank in Czech Republic and Tetra Bank in Slovakia, but we're still speaking about the knowing the local languages as well, Czech and Slovak. But Czech and Slovak, they're quite close to Ukrainian language, so it will be slightly easier for the people to study those languages. So they have more chances for the people to find a good fitting position. So our people, they're doing their best. We have a lot of people who have started with a standard role in the banking system, but we cannot say that there is going to be a huge demand for Ukrainian people there. I wouldn't have said that, because the countries they're expecting, they're waiting, especially for the banking segment, they are waiting for the employees to speak the local language, to be able to understand the local client. This is the priority for them. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Yulia. Thank you so much. It's always very interesting for me because that's why I've asked you about that. So how does it look like in real life? So, but right now I wanted to sum up this part of the discussion, and I think that for our panelists, that would have been an interesting thing to listen to as well. And our colleagues from the German economic teams that have offered us to invite the expert on this topic to invite Matthias Lübke, who is the senior analyst for the Institute of World Economy. So thank you very much for providing your comments to our report that is going to be published today. But right now, Matthias, I would like to pass the floor to you and to ask for your comments of your vision of what might be the perspective for Ukrainian refugees. What might be the perspectives in the labor market in those countries that they're currently residing under the temporary protection? And what would be the perspective in your point of view? What would be the perspective based on your experience? What would be the perspectives of them getting back to Ukraine? And what kind of a state policy might especially in the countries of the European Union, might we expect? Are they going to be trying to get rid of Ukrainian refugees, or will the European countries try to retain the Ukrainians as strong as much as possible and to include them into their society? Please, Matthias, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for having me in this discussion, and it's good to be back in Kiev, even though only virtually. It's difficult to say what exactly is going to happen, obviously, because the situation is very special. It's very new to everybody. It's worth saying that Ukrainian refugees are treated much more favorably than many other refugee groups. There is, of course, visa liberalization throughout the European Union. This is something that most refugees, say from Syria or Iraq or Afghanistan, simply have never had, obviously. There is also the Temporary Protection Directive, which was activated for the first time ever, which means that Ukrainian refugees don't have to apply for asylum. They are automatically granted a status which amounts to being a recognized refugee, which means they can stay in the European Union until 2024. They can work, they can receive social benefits on the same conditions as national citizens. So here's a very special situation. At the same time, of course, most of the refugees in the European Union now are either women or children, because able-bodied men, for obvious reasons, are not allowed to leave Ukraine. I think as migration economists, we have to say we don't know what's going to happen when that changes. We all hope the war is going to be over at some point, and that means men will be able to reunite with their families abroad. Right now, if people reunite, it's going to be the families coming back to Ukraine. So that's a very different situation, and we really don't know what's going to happen. What we also do see is that of course, a lot of territory is occupied by Russia. And even if that is liberated, a lot of it is still going to be very badly destroyed. So a lot of people may not have anywhere to return to. So we would expect to see that emigration, which then becomes some form of labor migration, in combination with forced migration, that sort of emigration will become an important survival strategy for a lot of people, as indeed it is now. And maybe the one thing to look forward to is to try and make this as flexible a strategy for people as possible. It's very unusual for refugees to worry about being able to be on business travel throughout the Schengen zone. I mean, most refugees, that doesn't occur to most refugees. But if you can sort out these issues, or the double taxation issues about the 180-day fiscal status deadline, if you can sort that out, then really you can think of a lot of transnationalism, a lot of flexibility moving back and forth between Western Europe and Ukraine. And that can be a lifeline for a lot of people. People can train, people can wait out until things improve, people can try to go back. and maybe decide to stay in Europe for Western Europe for another year and then go back to Ukraine. So maybe the conditions are there to use migration to Western Europe as a sort of flexible survival strategy. And given the goodwill that the European Union institutions in Brussels, as well as a lot of member states have shown already, I would be carefully optimistic about a lot of cooperation from their side on the issues that you mentioned, like double taxation agreements and deadlines and fiscal status. So this may provide a lifeline to a lot of people, and in many ways we simply don't know what's going to happen because we don't know how the war is going to end.
Thank you, Professor. The questions that is like in my head, and you feel it better than I could hear in Kiev. In your opinion, like what will be the policy of different EU governments towards retaining Ukrainian refugees? Like we know from the previous experience that, like for example, Poland is very pragmatic. And we see even in the current behaviors that Poland really does everything possible to retain those Ukrainians and to integrate them into the labor market. And like while certainly like maintaining some balance with preserving Ukraine as an independent country. But like Poland is not the only EU country, like, you know, Germany better. Like what is your feeling? Will it be some neutral policy? Will it be aggressive labor market integration to retain Ukrainians and then convert temporary protection into some work permits and then residence permits? Or it will be pushing Ukrainian out from the countries as soon as the war is over, and not integrating them into the relevant labor markets? What is your opinion? What is your feeling?
I find it difficult to speak about all EU countries here, but speaking about the German experience, I think the approach is exactly as it is towards other refugee groups. People have the option to do language courses. They can get a lot of support trying to find jobs if and when they know the language, if they need the language at all. It seems a lot of people do not know English, so learning German may indeed be important. And that is happening in Germany very much like it is for other refugee groups. And I think very generally in Germany, we've moved away from the policy stance that we had as late as during the wars in former Yugoslavia, when we really sort of tried to push people back very insensitively and for no good reason after they had been in Germany for a long time. I don't think that's going to happen. I think for those who are able to fit into the labor market, they will have no problem to stay in Germany if they want to stay. So I would expect them to be quite free to choose. So there is an obvious attraction of going back to your home country, your motherland, but people will weigh that against how they live at present in, for example, Germany, and that is going to be their choice more than a matter of policy.
Thank you. There is a question from the chat. I will slightly rephrase it. Do you believe there will be like some policies and some success in helping Ukrainian refugees in their entrepreneurship efforts in the receiving countries, like helping to build new companies, to register as individual entrepreneurs, launch startups? Have you seen any signs of this?
Well, all of this is part of the labor market integration efforts. And once people know some German or sort of good English, that is certainly going to be an option for many. I mean, if they have a business model, especially if they can work on the connection between Ukraine and Germany, which is going to be there, it's really up to them to make it happen. There won't be, I guess there will be a lot of support measures, but ultimately it's going to depend on the talents and the initiative of what people can do. Of course, we know that, for example, lots of Syrian entrepreneurs are very active in Turkey and help to promote trade with Syria. And I would certainly expect to see that kind of thing with refugees and a lot of other people happening between EU countries and Ukraine, simply because there are 4 million Ukrainians just in the EU, more or less. And that's a large number. I mean, that's 10% of the Ukrainian population, counting everybody from baby to very old person. And that is going to have an impact on transnational activities. And as we all hope, there will be a positive economic development in Ukraine. There's a lot of potential for that transnational activity as well.
Thank you, Professor. У нас є питання. Я прошу Славу.
And thank you, professors. And I would like to ask my colleague, and we have a question from Oksana Hrishina. I would like to ask her to unmute herself and to get her into the panel so that she will be able to ask her question from voice. Yes, but somehow I do not see her in the panelist. Maybe there is some kind of a technical delay. We now have 2 SAS office, but we don't seem to have Oksana. Okay, so maybe that's some kind of a technical problem that has been there. Okay, so I think that we have discussed a lot of issues already. The questions that have been mentioned in the chat, we've tried to cover them as well, and our speakers have covered them nicely. I do hope that we have had a very good summary and a very good generalization from the European business associations, and we have heard the specific cases from Raiffeisen Bank Ukraine, and we have had this point of view from the international perspective that has been provided, that Professor Lübke has provided us. And I'm really grateful to my colleagues, Alexandra and Maria, who have prepared the report and have presented you with our reports. We have been working all together on this report. We are doing that every month, and I do hope that in a month we will be able to meet again, that we will be able to provide you with overall review and the focus topic. And I would like to once again remind you that the brief itself, the brief in English and in Ukrainian, is going to be published today or the latest in the morning tomorrow. It's going to be published at our website, and the presentations that you have seen today, they will be published there as well. Thank you for your participation, and I wish you a calm and a nice evening. Thank you. Thank you, Lib, and goodbye. Thank you, goodbye.